Hello, this is Dr. Michael Hart. Welcome to Political Science 231, International Relations. International Relations Theory, and Current Developments. This is the title of our first lecture. What is international relations, or IR for short? As a field of study, international relations is a subfield of political science. Political science is a social science. Social sciences study society, as opposed to natural sciences, which study nature. Political science has many other subfields, including American politics, comparative politics, law, and public policy. International relations, like political science itself, is a 20th century discipline. International relations has many theories, which perhaps more accurately should be called approaches or perspectives. Why do we need theories, approaches, perspectives? One of the main purposes of higher education is to develop a disciplined mind. Theories, approaches, perspectives help us accomplish that by training us to think systematically and generally, that is to say, theoretically. Instead of limiting ourselves to the booming, buzzing confusion of many separate events, we think of each event as an instance of some more general phenomenon. Ask yourself, what is this an instance of when thinking about international events, or any political events for that matter? What is this an instance of? This leads us to a better understanding of the world around us, because it allows us to first see the big picture, and second, to put separate events we are living through in the context of, or in relation to, that big picture. Difference between theories on one hand and approaches and perspectives on the other. Science normally proceeds with observations of the real world. Then patterns are discerned from the observations. Then a hypothesis, that is to say, an educated guess, is developed about what patterns tell us about the relationship between two or more variables. Then the hypothesis is tested over and over again, and if it holds up, after repeated testing, it becomes known as a scientific law. For example, Newton's three laws of motion and Newton's law of gravity. Theories in science are not provable. You cannot prove them to be true. You can only disprove them. If after repeated testing, a theory hasn't been disproven, it's known as a scientific law. And then if we can come up with a general explanation or formulation of why the scientific law exists, that general explanation or formulation is called a theory. In international relations, we do not have theories in a strict scientific definition, because we cannot set up a controlled environment in which to test our hypotheses. We rely on observations and comparisons of data from those observations. Therefore, in international relations, what we have is approaches or perspectives, that is, systematic explanations for international events. We do not have true scientific theories. But for practical purposes, for practical everyday purposes, international relations books and international relations scholars, including myself, use the words theory, approaches, and perspectives interchangeably. Okay? So if in future lectures I say theory or approach or perspective, these words mean the same thing, a systematic way to study international events. Just to recap, so everyone is clear, a true scientific theory cannot be proved to be true. You have to be able to imagine conditions such as, if found in the real world after experimentations, show that the theory is false, then you have a scientific theory, A scientific theory, to put it a different way, is falsifiable. If you have a statement or a series of statements that is not falsifiable, that cannot prove to be false, then what you have is not a scientific theory, but rather a dogma or a doctrine, but definitely not science. Antecedents. Even though international relations, as I said, is a 20th century field of study, it has long antecedents. That is to say, it has precursors, things that preceded its modern incarnation, its modern form. Where can you find them? You can find them in philosophy and history. International events have been a subject of historical chronicles since at least the time that history was first written down. So, international relations as a descriptive, not particularly rigorous, but as a descriptive study, goes back thousands of years. Also, before political science became its own discipline, politics and thus international events have been the subject of the wider field of philosophy. Before the 20th century, philosophy was considered to be the queen of sciences. And as such, every other endeavor pretty much was a subfield of philosophy. This has changed well over 100 years ago. So, a number of philosophers, and we will encounter them in future lectures and definitely in your textbook and in your perhaps outside endeavors at research in international relations, you will encounter philosophers who have contributed to what eventually became modern field of international relations. Philosophers like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Hugo Grotius, and others. Lastly, I would like to say a few words about current events. Current events give us much fodder to think about and rethink a lot of international relations theory approaches and perspectives. And current events and recent events are definitely fascinating. We will see in a future lecture that they open up a whole new area, I would argue, of relevance of international relations. And I hope that you will agree with me and find international relations a highly relevant field of study from which you personally can benefit, perhaps intellectually, perhaps in your career. We'll see as we go along. See you in the next lecture.